I want to get into autophagy a little bit because I know it's a subject that you have researched extensively, and you wrote an entire book on it, a fantastic book, and it is just very well researched. There's a lot of information in there. So what are some surprising things that you learned about autophagy in all of your research for the book?
Well, I think the biggest thing that that I did learn and other people don't really, let's say, know is that autophagy is not just this garbage disposal system. That the kind of superficial understanding is that it makes you live longer and kind of eliminates this junk material. Well, it can do that to a certain extent, but it also is involved with almost every other process in the body. Like, it's involved in the immune system. It eliminates, pathogens, viruses, as well as like even fat burning is involved. It's involved in eliminating plaque from the brain, like the toxic Alzheimer's plaque, and even regulates glycogen content. So it is very central to almost like every process in the body. And usually it happens also like to a certain extent all the time, and whether or not we need more of it or not depends on like many other factors. So it's not like this that all autophagy is good all the time. There are times where you don't want to have it, and there are times you want to have it not slightly more, but it's supposed to be this relatively stable process regardless, so that you would still want to have like some basal autophagy happening on like a regular basis.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's one thing. The way that I kind of see it is it's like this recycling program that occurs in your body all the time, but there are things that you can do that will block that natural process. Like if you're eating every 2 hours, you're going to block that natural process where your body's going to be recycling and sort of taking some of the garbage out, but recycling a lot of those proteins and damaged organelles and things. If you're constantly in the fed state, that's one thing that can block it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like foods and nutrients do directly affect whether or not or how much autophagy are you getting, and there are certain things that will like directly block it. Would be like insulin does it, high amounts of carbs would do it, high amounts of protein can also do it, as well as like some other like underlying factors like a vitamin D deficiency can also prevent the formation of these autophagosomes that kind of govern the process of autophagy. So yeah, like many other things that can make the person experience like a deficient amount of autophagy, which is linked to like a lot of diseases as well as accelerated aging. So you don't want to block it completely, or at least you don't want to not be able to produce it when needed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think of it as if you never took the recycling out and it just started piling up in your garage and then your hallway and then eventually in your whole house, if you just never took it out. And that's kind of like a analogy for it that I like to use, that your house would just gradually build up with all this waste, right?
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy, and it does essentially describe what's going to happen.
So what have you found in your research and writing that are some hacks for people, or maybe not hacks so much as some of the best ways to get autophagy and maybe build that into your lifestyle in a manageable, practical way?
Yeah, well, the process of autophagy is regulated a lot by energy balance. So if you're in this overabundant state, you have excess energy, then autophagy is going to be low. Whereas if you're slightly energy deprived or you're experiencing physiological stress, then autophagy is going to gradually start to increase. So things that promote autophagy would be like exercise, fasting, calorie restriction does it. Ketosis can do it to a certain extent, and like heat, the cold, those things will gradually start to ramp up the process of autophagy. So on a daily basis, what I think every people would want to do is to just stay physically active, not overeat calories, maybe do some aspects of this time restricted eating where they confine their eating window to a certain extent. And like if they get access to like a sauna or something cold, then that can also be something to do like on a daily basis.
So let's talk about fasting a little bit more, because it seems to be, I want to talk about fasting and then we'll talk about exercise and compare the two. But with fasting in particular, we've seen there's a limited amount of research done on humans, and it seems to show you need around 72 hours, something like that, to see some of those autophagy markers increase. What do you think of that? What are some of the myths, that you see propagated out there about autophagy and fasting, and what is the real way and best way to get it through fasting?
Well, yeah, I actually seen some studies where they show that it appears already within like 16 hours or so.
Okay.
But of course, like the amount is much smaller compared to like a 3-day fast or something. Like how much do you need is also like very context dependent and varies between individuals. But generally, you do start to see a gradual increase in autophagy once your liver glycogen has been depleted. And if you do nothing, if you just sit around, then the liver glycogen is going to be depleted by like 16 up to 24 hours. That's when it's going to be relatively low, and that's where you start to produce ketones and manufacturers of these more autophagosomes. But you can also speed this process up as well. Like if you do some exercise, then you're going to deplete the liver glycogen even faster. Or if you eat like low carb, then you will also have like a lower buffer zone, or you have to burn through less glycogen to reach that state. So generally, I think maybe you could probably start to see some increased autophagy within like if you're like very physically active, then you can probably see it within like 14 hours or so. But yeah, that's something some of the time frame that you can expect.
So one of the comparisons that I often make for people is I talk about how just restricting carbs is a fasting mimetic. So for people who are doing keto and are restricting carbs to like below 20 total per day, close to 10, maybe 0 even on zero carb, would you see autophagy in that situation?
Keto diet mimics a lot of the aspects of fasting. So you have lower blood sugar and lower insulin, and you would see autophagy happening faster because of keeping the liver glycogen somewhat limited. But there are some other like unique things that you get also from fasting, such as fasting, eventually it's going to turn on like stem cells, and fasting is also going to promote like heat shock proteins, which get turned on if you're experiencing heat, for example, and they also have like some other unique benefits. Yeah, like you can essentially expect to maybe get some of the benefits of fasting faster if you're doing a keto diet compared to if you're eating a high carb diet or you're eating like high amounts of food. But at the same time, like eating protein itself is also like a direct inhibitor of autophagy by turning on mTOR, which is the growth switch of the body. So even if you restrict carbs, then you can still inhibit the autophagy if you turn on mTOR, and which is then going to block autophagy. But if you're doing some aspects of time restricted eating, then in the fasted state, you would expect to get into autophagy faster because of the limited liver glycogen.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I'm curious what you think about fasting overall and metabolic rate. I don't know if you saw anything on that when you were researching, but there seems to be some conflicting information out there depending on who you're listening to. Some fasting advocates say that fasting increases your metabolic rate. I think that may be true to an extent, but what I think more likely can happen with a lot of extended fasting is that just like caloric restriction, at some point your body is intelligent and it's going to say, well, if we don't have any food coming in at all here, we're going to have to slow things down a little bit. So logically, to me, it seems that a lot of fasting can probably lead to some metabolic rate slowdown. What do you think?
Yeah, like it does make sense, and it is it is actually like a good thing for the metabolic rate to slow down if you are doing like extended fasting, because if you have like a very fast metabolism while fasting, then you're going to burn through the muscle, and you're going to be catabolic. So that's not like a good thing for survival. But like in the short term, if you may see like an increase in metabolic rate, then it might be because of like cortisol and stress hormones, which isn't like a good thing necessarily either. But yeah, like I think it's not like a big problem if you're doing only like a 3-day fast and then you eat regularly afterwards. The problem is only if you kind of carry over this limited energy intake to the feeding phase. So if you stay low calorie after breaking the fast,